You can go ahead, Peter.
Oh, thank you, Millicent. Hi, it's Pedestrian Programs and Policy Subcommittee for the Minneapolis PAC. We start off with a notice that this meeting may involve the remote participation by members either by telephone or other electronic means due to the local public emergency novel coronavirus pandemic. And this is pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota statutes, section 13D.021. That's the announcement. Hello, welcome everybody. It is November P&P. We have 4 items on the agenda. We start off, Amy Morgan and Kathleen Mail are here from Minneapolis Public Works to go over the ADA 2022 plan update. And I was just looking the other day, and it was like the ADA was signed into law in 1991 by George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush. So it's been 30 years. Is that 91? Right. Anyway, it's been a while. And it's great to see Amy and Kathleen. Welcome, and you can take it away. And if you would start off, if you're looking for what you're looking for PAC, if anything, pursuant to this meeting, subsequent to this, let us know. Welcome and thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Morgan. Here today to talk about the ADA transition plan, as you mentioned. Kathleen May also here on this as well. Just pulling up my screen real quick. Awesome. Can you all see that okay?
It's up there.
Perfect. So really today, just providing an update on the draft 2022 update to the ADA transition plan for Public Works. This is something that is still in process. We're anticipating having the complete update in early 2022. So today, just kind of highlighting some big piece items of the work, more to come. So the current ADA transition plan for Public Works was adopted by our City Council in February of 2020. Within that plan, there are 20 recommendations that look to improve access in the public right-of-way. Within these 20 recommendations, there's different milestones and anticipated timelines for each of these. As part of the Transportation Action Plan that was adopted in December of 2020, Public Works is committed to conducting a review of the ADA transition plan on a biennial basis. This review is really to evaluate the progress and suggest any plan updates. To quickly just like overview of the goals of this review and update, I know I've mentioned a couple of them already, but first and foremost is to understand and evaluate any progress that Public Works has made to date on these recommendations and milestones that are outlined in the 2020 plan. While doing that evaluation, updating any of the recommendations or timelines as needed. Third, we are looking to update the language in this ADA plan to be reflective of the most recent policy documents. So as I mentioned, the TAP was adopted after the ADA plan, so just updating some of those text pieces so that they're consistent across all of our policy documents. And lastly, we will be reporting this out to City Council and the public in early 2022. So taking a look at the current milestone progress, something I do want to note, as I mentioned, there's 20 recommendations. Within each of those recommendations, there's a number of different milestones. So there's a total of 36 milestones to help us reach those 20 recommendations. You can see here in this graphic, we've completed 5 of those 36. 14 are currently in progress, 12 not started, and 5 are considered up next. One caveat that I do want to point out is that 6 of the 14 that are in progress, these are items that are considered to be ongoing or annual action items that Public Works has been doing and will continue to do. We didn't want to classify these as done since they are something that are continuing to happen and will continue into the future. Another thing I want to mention in terms of the 12 that are not yet started, A lot of the work within the ADA plan is very linear, and so there's a number of actions that are waiting for current in-progress action items to be complete before we're able to start that work. So all that to say, there's a lot of really good work that's happening, and also a lot of work to come. Some of those ongoing or annual pieces that I mentioned, installing ADA compliant pedestrian curb ramps and APS into our capital projects. We also report out annually on the improvements to pedestrian curb ramps, APS, sidewalks, and street crossings through the Your City, Your Streets progress report. We continue to monitor any issues and feedback that we receive on parking and operations of our shared mobility options, such as scooters or a nice ride, things like that. Lastly, always looking to expand our departmental knowledge on ADA topics by having staff attend trainings and classes as they're available. So a couple of things I just want to highlight today. We are making progress on a number of things, but 3 things I just wanted to really chat through today are our sidewalk and street crossing inventory pilot project, the snow and ice corner clearing funding, and a 2022 budget request for ADA and right-of-way staffing resources. So first, looking at the sidewalk inventory pilot project, this was born out of recommendation 3.4 to supplement existing data on sidewalks and street crossings by completing a sidewalk and street crossing inventory. During the development of the plan, there was a need was identified that we need to have this data to understand kind of what is the deficit so that we can prioritize improvements. And so in 2021, Public Works conducted a sidewalk inventory pilot project to explore different data collection methods and analysis methods to evaluate the condition and design of our public sidewalks and street crossings. So our staff and consultants went out into the field and tested 5 different methods that I will chat through here. First, they looked at manual data collection. This is staff going out manually, doing those measurements, getting the cross slopes. And this is a method that is, it's very low cost in terms of initial investment, but it's very time intensive. There's also a lot of room for error in terms of kind of how people are collecting the data or how they're doing the measurement. A lot of human error that can happen there. Second, they looked at a tablet-based data collection. This is essentially just using some sort of tablet to measure the cross slopes and any kind of breaks in the pavement, things like that. This image on the top right shows what that might look like. This, again, it's pretty low cost, very staff time intensive as well. And there's a lot of training that needs to go into that in terms of staff time too. Third, they looked at a GPS or GIS based data collection. This uses a smart level and again, connecting to a tablet also, but essentially this information is uploaded to the cloud instantly. It can be collected pretty quickly. Again, it requires that staff time to go out to every location. Everything's on the cloud, which is nice, but there are some challenges. There's need for consultant training and support to be able to do this. Fourth, they looked at a Segway-based data collection that can be seen kind of in this image on the right-hand lower side. This method, essentially there's, I don't know the exact terminology, some sort of laser similar that essentially scans the sidewalk as the Segway drives over it. So this is a pretty quick way to collect that data. Another benefit of it is that the Segway is about the same width as a wheelchair, and so it collects that data, kind of understanding what that width is. Challenges with this is that it's generally a higher cost of entry with needing to either buy or lease the Segway. Lastly, they looked at a Lidar-based data collection method. This method, it's very data heavy. Essentially, they use a piece of equipment that creates a point cloud, which is essentially just an extremely detailed model of the surrounding area. So it's extremely detailed, but it's a lot more data than is needed. It's also a fairly expensive method to do as well. These are just the 5 methods that our staff looked at. Something I do want to note is that they currently just did this evaluation. They're now moving into, or sorry, they just did this data collection process, and they're moving into the evaluation phase to understand what is the feasibility of scaling these. So what are some of the cost implications? Which ones are best suited to do this on a citywide scale? And so those are conversations that are starting to happen now, and will help inform future conversations around really how do we do this on a citywide scale. And really the goal of this work is once we can do it on a city scale, we can understand what is the scope and breadth of the deficits across the city and how can we prioritize making improvements to all of them. Next, I want to chat about the snow and ice corner clearing funding. So this comes out of recommendation 3.9 in the ADA plan to continue to address seasonal barriers such as snow and ice on sidewalks as outlined by Minneapolis Ordinance 4.5. So in 2020, an additional $300,000 was appropriated by our city council to further enhance the level of service for corner clearing. These additional funds brought the completion time from what was 4 or 5 days before down to 2 days following a snow emergency. This was something that during budget cuts last year, this is something that stayed in the budget because people knew how important this is. And I think that just goes to show that there's a commitment here to keep the level of service on corner clearing up. Lastly, in terms of ADA and right-of-way staffing resources, we really have seen a need for a team to help track and inspect and inventory our curb ramps and our APS and sidewalks that are built by the city, by private developers, utilities, and other agencies within the city, and really help manage all of this work. And so Public Works looking to increase that staffing capacity to help manage the use of the right-of-way, improve the overall coordination, as I mentioned, and help advance actions that are in the ADA transition plan. So as part of the 2022 mayor's recommended budget, it includes $120,000 for staffing resources related to ADA inspection and right-of-way management. So although this is not yet adopted, it is something that we are really pushing for to help with that coordination piece. So a couple items that are up next. First, this I already mentioned a bit in the sidewalk pilot project, but Public Works is evaluating the scalability, cost, and accuracy of the 5 different data collection methods. This is going to help inform those future conversations related to doing it on a citywide scale. Second, Public Works in 2022 will be starting the update to the 20-year streets funding plan, including updating the equity component for infrastructure prioritization. So those are just a couple pieces that are to come next year within the ADA plan. One piece of this work is, as I mentioned, we'll be reevaluating the timelines for the different recommendations and milestones within the ADA plan. And so a couple things I just want to acknowledge with this work is that the ADA plan was adopted just a month before COVID-19 impacts began. And really, there was a lot of impacts, as we saw in 2020 and 2021, in relation to the pandemic and the death of George Floyd and citywide staffing and budgeting impacts. And so the work has not moved maybe as fast as we thought it would have, but we're still very committed to doing this work. But as part of this review, we are reevaluating those timelines so that they're based in the realities of capacities and funding that we have today. In terms of the timeline for this work, staff has been reviewing the 2020 plan document over the last few months. This month, we are providing this update to you all, MACAPOD, and the Committee on Aging. We'll be continuing to refine this work and bring it out through the formal city process in early 2022. One thing I do want to note just about kind of this work is that we are still in the process of doing this update. Really what the update will look like, there will be a red line document that will include those text changes. And there will be an appendix item that highlights kind of the progress made since the adoption of the 2020 plan and kind of next steps moving forward. So with that, just open it up for any questions or comments that you all have. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, we're ready for discussion and questions, and I'm looking for hands raised. And we'll just while we're trying to do in the subcommittees is to raise your hand, and or if you're not able to raise your hand and want to and pipe up, take 1 point, and then we'll keep going, and we can return to you for subsequent comments and questions. So with that, we can have at it. If I can ping Julia on this, if you want to reflect back on our last the last ADA, it wasn't a plan, but it was a progress report we got last time in the last year and a half. Any reflections on that? Or
I don't know if I have any specifically on that, but I do have some kind of broader questions and thoughts. And I think one of them is I'm curious what we know about how people are actually using the public right of way when they're using wheelchairs or other accessibility devices in Minneapolis, and how much of this is kind of grounded in observational data or talking to people, especially people who are car free and depend on our public right of way for basic accessibility.
Yeah, I would say a lot of it is based around conversations had with people in terms of how they're using that infrastructure. We do have information on kind of what infrastructure is meeting ADA standards, but in terms of how people are actually using that infrastructure, it would be more through those conversations.
I'll just add to, oh, sorry, can I add something real quick, Julia and Amy? This is Kathleen Mail. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. This update is really, it's really an update. It's not a rewrite of the ADA plan. It's a review and looking to see what changes are there. So the engagement that was done with the 2020 plan, there was a lot of discussion. And if you recall, Kelsey Fote, a transportation planner on our team, was the one who led that plan development, and she hosted, she did a lot of different engagement and went out and talked with different groups, disability, people with different disabilities, different organizations that their clientele were those. So in terms of engagement right now, there's not a lot of engagement. This is like a review, like an internal review. And so I just wanted to remind us of that past piece that plays into this.
Okay, and I think I was meaning more sort of the observational, just also knowing that people are not always great at self-reporting, but that answered that. Peter, do you want to, are there other questions?
Yeah, thanks, Julia. So I guess not seeing any other hands. What would you like from either like from PAC, or what comes next? When you said you've got will you return with the final report in the next year or something subsequent to that?
Yeah, we can share out what that final update is in early 2022 once it goes through that process, so that everyone has that update and what that information is. Happy to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so Peter, to just directly also answer the question, right now we're not looking for anything. This was an informational item. We just wanted you all to be aware that this review and relooking at this was happening, and just be aware of where we're at and with some of the highlights and the anticipated, relooking at some of the timelines given what the last 2 years has looked like, and just keeping you all in the loop with where we're at with this plan update.
Is
Thanks,
there a way
Kathleen.
we
Yeah.
can support the faster funding, faster work on this.
Julia, can you repeat that one more time? I missed the beginning of it.
How can we as the PAC support getting you the staffing, funding, and different things that you need to be able to really address this? Like, would a resolution help? Is there something that we can be keeping an eye out for, or a lens we can use with our CIP recommendations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
I guess it's incidental to what Julia's saying. I guess it's like, is the $120,000 new in the mayor's budget, would that be an FTE or added time for existing staff, or to be determined, or?
That would be new FTE. So, Julia, I mean, I don't think there's a strong answer back, unfortunately. And Matthew or others, if you have something you want to input here, you know, I mean, it's an effort. We're working on it. There is increased attention. I think you can see with the mayor's budget too. You know, so that's a success should that happen. We'll find out in the next couple of weeks as the budget gets approved, you know, where that stands. I guess that's what I've got right now.
Okay.
Oh, no support needed right now, but ongoing.
Yeah, I mean, I
Good.
think
Yeah.
that all of your work that you all have done, I mean, the work you do consistently highlights and elevates and shows the need for the work in progress within this realm of the infrastructure work we do. So I think that's reflective of kind of where we're at this moment. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
One last question would be, you mentioned sort of the ways that things are being captured for reporting with scooters that might be blocking the sidewalk, but I'm unclear on the best ways to report cars blocking sidewalks or curb ramps, or sort of where to refer people to when we're coming up against accessibility violations. How is there someplace that's starting to emerge that's more effective than 311 for gathering that data at the very least?
As of now, 311 is still the most effective way to do that. It doesn't solve the immediate need, but that's a system that we have currently. That would be the best place.
Does that get counted? So it's been completely ineffective in my experience, but if it's data that is being used in order to determine planning choices, that would add a layer of, or a motivation for continuing to use it even when it doesn't improve things immediately. Do you pull from it for assessing things?
I think it definitely feeds into the work. As for looking directly at all the comments that are in there, that's not our division of public works. But I think we are in tune with our traffic staff as they're going through those comments. If things are coming up, we definitely integrate solutions where feasible into the work.
So if people are getting comments like that the vehicle isn't actually a problem when it is blocking something, does that mean that there's an individual that might not be bringing that information to you then if they aren't viewing it as an issue when it gets reported to the system? Or would it still somehow filter to you? And if this might be going into the weeds too much, so Peter or Matthew, feel free to cut me off.
Can I answer that real quick? This is Kathleen. So that's an operational issue. Amy is not getting that information. Amy's associate transportation planner working to update the plan. She is not within our operational group. So that information is not designed to get to Amy, right?
But the scooter stuff comes via 311. That was referenced in one of the early slides, like scooter and mobility share things.
Yep, and that goes to our traffic and parking mobility division. And Matthew maybe has something else to add here.
I was just gonna say, I believe that vehicles blocking sidewalks goes to traffic control. So totally different departments, right? But anyway.
I guess basically I'm wondering, since it does seem like information about scooters or bike share makes it to the transportation planning division or part of the department, how do we make sure parallel issues with vehicles, which I think most people are experiencing far more often, can also make it to wherever they need to help inform conversations? Is that structure already in place, or?
Kathleen or Matthew, if you know more about how the.
Maybe I can jump in real quick. This is Chris for a second. So Julia, I think what you're asking is like basically when that type of thing goes into 311, like yes, we have that data and it is archived. And I think theoretically, if we wanted to like pull that to look at a planning type effort, we could, and that's what's been done with like the scooter data in the past. So like we do keep data from 311, but. Yeah. But I don't think there's been a push to gather the scooter data, and like that was an option for a while. If you call 311, it would say if you have a complaint about a scooter, here's you can let us know this way. So if I may, Julia, maybe let's bring this up in our last agenda item again, because I think it has to do with some of the stuff that we were talking about with that of like where the PAC can kind of like ask about public works processes. I don't think it works for today's, but yeah. Thank you for shutting me down. I appreciate it.
Good. All right. Well, thanks for the update, Amy, Kathleen. And we're going to leave it at that, as they say on cable news. And thank you for coming and being here. We're going to go on to the next item on our agenda, and that's Mike Samuelson is here, also Minneapolis Public Works. And we have with a CIP overview and discussion.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Samuelson. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a transportation planner here with Public Works. And I also have a couple of colleagues who are on the phone or on the video, I should say, as well. Just let them introduce themselves before I get going here.
Hi, everyone. Liz Heyman with Transportation Planning and Public Works.
Excellent.
Hi, everyone. Bria Fast, also with Transportation Planning, Public Works.
And I will just note that Bria is pretty new to our group. She's been here a couple months. I know she was at the BAC and PAC, the engineering subcommittees. So for some of you, this might be your first time seeing her. Just wanted to welcome and introduce her in particular as a new staff person. So we are here today to talk about the CIP, the Capital Improvement Program. I know for many of you, this might be a refresher. For some of you, it might be new information. But as our CIP process kind of kicks off for next year's budget, so we're already thinking about the budget that will be approved in December of 2023, we wanted to come to this group and just let you all know that we're starting and provide a little bit of information so that you can better discuss internally and provide your resolutions and recommendations. So
say, Mike, I meant to say, it might be on the very next slide, but I meant to open up and just make sure to ask you about the timing of the work you need from PAC in terms of resolution or what have you. So thank you.
Yep, we will definitely get to that. So thank you. So just kind of an overview of what we'll be discussing today. Just a little bit of background on the capital program in general, a little bit of kind of where the 2022 to 2027 CIP stands right now, talk very briefly about the programs that we have, and then spend hopefully most of our time for questions and discussion. So in terms of our kind of capital life cycle, you can see that we are kind of at the top of the slide. So both the current 2022 budget is being, in the process of markup and resolution, and will be passed by City Council after that process before the end of the year. And at the staff level, we're kind of in the bottom rectangle there, where we're starting to identify and evaluate potential projects, thinking about next year's budget. And then, we'll be working our way through the process, which includes a presentation to CLIC, the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, in April, and then kind of going through this life cycle rather until we end up at the same point next year. So a little bit of background on our policy guidance. So the 20-year streets funding ordinance and the associated plan provides a lot of guidance on project selection, has criteria based on modal use, demographic data, and asset conditions that we use to help select projects. This was passed a few years ago in 2017. In addition, we also get a lot of guidance from our existing planning documents. So the 2040 plan, and then nestled under that, the Transportation Action Plan, which was recently passed. And then also things like our Vision Zero plan and other local or street specific plans, work that our partners in other divisions and departments have done. I know that this group is in particular very interested in the connection between transportation and climate, and so I just want to call out that the guidance that we look at in relation to climate is from city approved documents. I know that there's a lot of different reports and studies that are out there, and we certainly pay attention to those. But in terms of sort of the policy guidance that we have, it is focused on what's been provided by council. So that's kind of our North Star. And from a transportation standpoint, that's largely what's in the TAP. So just a little bit more about kind of the work that we do. So a very important part of our work, in addition to our own projects, are our partnerships and collaborations. In particular with Metro Transit and their ABRT lines, which are getting built out. We saw a lot of work being done on the D line this year, with construction starting on that, and the E line and B lines are well underway. Also, our partnerships with Hennepin County and MnDOT. Hennepin County wrapped up their construction on Lake Street this year. MnDOT also doing a lot of work on 35W and associated transit improvements with the Orange Line. So those partners are really important to our work, and also very important to our budgeting. And in addition to that, thinking about our outside funding. So I know Ethan is here later to talk about some potential grant applications as we gear up for the next cycle of federal funding. As many of you, I'm sure, know, at the federal level, there's a new transportation bill that was recently approved. And so we are tracking that very closely, coordinating with partners, with MnDOT, to figure out exactly how that will affect us at the local level, figuring out if there are other opportunities for us to leverage more outside funding. But you can see here a couple examples of projects where we won funding last round. Johnson 35 by the Quarry Shopping Center, as well as the Hennepin Dunwoody Bikeway. And I know we're planning to submit quite a few applications in 2022 and hopefully secure some additional funding. So just a little bit of kind of where we've been and some of the work that we've done. So since that 20-year streets funding plan was passed in 2017, you can see we've built 17 miles of bikeways, close to 2,000 ADA ramp upgrades, over 500 curb extensions. We don't have our numbers for 2021 yet, so we're still stuck showing you 2020. We're in the process of collecting that information to figure out exactly how much we did get done this year. But we know just from a lot of ribbon cuttings that have happened the last few weeks that there have been a lot of transformational projects that were built. Plymouth Avenue North, a lot of work downtown with the 4th Street corridor, as well as Hennepin Phase 2. I just went over the 10th Avenue Bridge, which was opened last week. I went over it for the first time today. That was really cool to see. So a lot of really good work, a lot of things that we're proud of in 2021. And we'll have that information reported to council in our annual report back next year, usually middle of the year, and we'll definitely be able to share it with this group as well. So in terms of the actual budgeting, the 2022 CIP that we were working through, just as a reminder, I think we shared some of this information with the PAC in the spring. But as we were working through that process, we worked with our partners over in finance, the finance department, and found that we had about $60 million less than we had anticipated in bond funding. And so that had kind of a knock-on in terms of delays to reconstruction projects, cuts to some of our other programs. And that reduction in funding, or less funding than we anticipated, just has to do with trying to match up with the bond targets that City Council approves annually. Those are typically approved in February. So this was, we anticipate this being a one-time thing, just in terms of sort of getting our spending more in line with the actual bond targets that were approved. So just in terms of what that means for for the budget, the mayor's proposed budget that's going forward. Again, I think this is information that we shared in the spring, but we did see about a 6% reduction to our bike ped programs. That's less of a reduction than to some of our other programs. We saw a greater reduction for traffic. We saw a greater reduction for our paving programs. We saw bridge delays. We saw a lot of reconstruction projects that are being delayed, which you can see on this page. So we did, try and follow through with the guidance that we have in TAP in terms of, how we prioritize those cuts and really trying to focus on maintaining as much as possible those bike ped programs. So just a little bit more detail on kind of what that looks like. So we saw a 20% reduction in funds for Vision Zero in 2022. The Sidewalk Gap program was canceled in that year. It will be coming back in 2023. But we are also very excited with some of that outside federal funding that we were able to inject a lot more money from outside sources than we lost. So, looking at nearly $6 million of outside funding for bike ped programs. We're also very excited to introduce our public spaces program in this year's budget. So I'm going to run through these programs pretty quickly because I think most folks are familiar with them, and I want to make sure to leave plenty of time for questions and discussion. But just this is an overview of the capital programs that we have that are focused on biking and walking. So our Vision Zero program, we've rolled that out for the first time this year, made improvements to a number of corridors, quick build improvements, so mostly paint and plastic bollards. So first year we're doing that, we're learning and documenting and changing our processes in terms of what we roll out, the equipment we use. We've got a number of corridors that we're looking at next year. Our Defective Hazardous Sidewalk program, this is a program where we inspect sidewalks in a few neighborhoods every year and then replace defective sidewalks with new concrete panels. So you can see it's a little small on your page here, but it's those yellow squares or boxes where we're planning to be in 2022. Sidewalk Gap program, again, this one canceled for 2022. We expect it to be coming back the following year. We've got a number of projects lined up. Murphy Square, Loring Park, one by Day McCoska, Pearl Park and South. So a number of projects here to close some critical sidewalk gaps in the city. Our Protected Bikeway program, able to build the first phase of Whittier-Lyndale this year on First Ave South, 28th Street in Blaisdell, and that also included a number of pedestrian and crossing improvements. We'll be looking to do the second phase of that project next year to wrap that up, taking it all the way down to 40th Street on Blaisdell. Our Safe Routes to School program, partnering with MPS. So we've got a project this year where construction was also delayed. That'll be wrapped up in 2022. It's near Whittier Elementary School, also in South Minneapolis. And then we've got a federal project next year near North, Safe Routes to School on 16th Avenue North. Our pedestrian safety program, so this focuses on spot improvements at typically unsignalized intersections. We had a couple this year. I know one was at 2nd and 3rd Northeast. And next year we've got another federal project on Lyndale Ave North, making improvements to a number of places or a number of intersections. And then again, our new public spaces program. So this is one where we expect funding to start in 2024 for the first time. So this is kind of following through with one of the items identified in the TAP, looking at building out pedestrian plazas, parklets, and other kind of features, which we didn't currently have funding for before we created this program. Just a couple more slides here. So some of our standalone projects, Queen Avenue, Bike Boulevard. This is one where we saw construction start, sort of preliminary construction, but most of this work is actually going to be done next year in 2022. So this will be a 4-mile long bike boulevard and traffic calming project. This was another federal project. The 18th Ave Trail Gap. This is going to close a 2-block trail gap between Marshall and California. We expect construction here to probably start in 2023, maybe late next year, but more likely the following year. And then our final project, our final bike ped project in the CIP is our North Side Greenway Phase 1. This is a project where we're expecting to apply for federal funding in the upcoming cycle, so next year. And this project would be probably 2026. Excuse me. So I know that was quite a bit of information. Thanks for bearing with me. In terms of next steps, I know that Chris and Matthew and Millicent will be working with both the PAC and the BAC to talk through kind of more about what you want to see and developing those resolutions. So that's not something that we need tonight. I think we're expecting that sometime in Q1 of next year. And then we anticipate coming back again to this committee in the spring with a little bit more information about what we are proposing for the next CIP cycle. And that's all sort of gearing up for our presentations to click in April of 2022. So with that, I will pause and see if there's any questions or comments that folks have.
Thanks, Mike. Nicely done. And thanks for you and your team being here today. We're at that stage for a discussion and questions and comments as to any of the particulars of the projects proposed or in the plans for the next years, or conceptually as regards the capital improvement program. So looking for hands. I'll ask one, on the conceptual side, just for, I'm not going to say for everybody, new people or because it helps me because I can use it too. Describe the integration or the where CLIC, that is the Capital Long Range Improvement Committee and CIP Capital Improvement Projects. Where do they meet in their roles, if that can be?
Sure. So so CLIC is a appointed committee. So it's appointed, each council member or each ward has 2 representatives, and then the mayor has, I can't remember, I think 6 representatives as well. So every department that proposes capital improvements, so Public Works, but also the Park Board and new buildings also go to CLIC and sort of submit their they're called capital budget requests. Basically, it's staff or departments saying, we'd like to build such a project. We want to fund it using these different types of dollars. This is why we need this project. And so CLIC's role essentially is to go to review the information that staff submits, and then to make recommendations to the mayor about what they would like to see in the budget. Then it's ultimately up to the mayor to either accept those recommendations or to modify them or propose his own budget that then goes to council. So that's CLIC's role. They sort of are a citizen oversight or overview committee that's part of the budgeting cycle.
All right, and what and the projects they review, are they completely subset of CIP, or they overlap, or they review everything, or?
Yeah, so we have to submit all of our projects. For a project to be in the approved budget, it has to go through CLIC. If we're planning to fund it with bond or cash dollars, yeah.
And Peter, to clarify, when you mean everything, do you mean like non-transportation projects? Is that what you're?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, for clarifying that. Yeah, I guess there are a set of work we saw in your slide deck that would be city funded, and some came external money, and some were, federal or regional or what have you. Is that everything? Every project under those categories go through CLIC as well, irrespective of their funding source.
Yeah, and even if we have federal dollars or outside dollars, there's almost always some kind of local match where we have to provide city dollars as well.
Sure.
I don't know if there's any instances where the federal government just comes in and gives us all the money to build whatever we want.
Okay. Soon.
Hopefully.
Thank you. Who else is out there? Any questions? Austin, Neil, Barb, Julia. I know Paul's here too. Hey, Paul. All right.
I have a quick question.
Yes, please.
The CLIC, then they also look at other city projects like parks projects and city building projects, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's right. So Public Works, I mean, we won't present on those projects. Those other departments will, but CLIC reviews of them all.
Thank you.
And I can't remember the rules on the chat anymore, but I can put a link that shows all of the options that we provided to CLIC last year that has all the projects, so you can give you an idea of what those projects are. Am I allowed to use the chat? I can't remember.
Not for that, but if you want to send it to me, I can send it out to to the group. Thanks for thinking of that.
That is, that is specifically the thing that we can't use chat for.
Oh, okay. That would be really helpful for that functionality. But hey,
I know.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Mike, can you go back to that slide before questions, please?
Yeah.
I want to hear from our co-chair too, but I just want to have that up while we talk about our next steps. So as for P&P's work, and then bring to the full committee. So the timing on that, Chris Kartheiser, we have December to write our resolution, or the rest.
Yeah, so like typically we've done like a months long kind of process where we'll have a few meetings without the CIP team, and the PAC will kind of think through what it wants to put in that resolution. I think we're probably in a place this year, just because of kind of changes that have happened in both the CIP and just the work the PAC has done over the last few years, where hopefully like at our next meeting, we can just do that whole resolution and kind of have that be one and done, and then get that to the CIP team, and they can take that and use that feedback as they make their final recommendations. But if for whatever reason, like the conversation is going beyond next time and we don't get to it, it's not absolutely necessary that the CIP team has it like January 1st or anything. So if we need an extra like month, we can do that. But I think it'd be a good goal to have our next subcommittee meeting, finish that resolution, and then pass it at the following full.
Sounds good to me. Julia?
How does the mayoral amendment impact this process?
Well, that is a good question, and I think it's a little too soon for us to tell. I don't know if Liz, if you have anything else to add.
Correct. We don't know yet. We are waiting to see how any new processes might work for this and many other things across the city.
Thank you. I'm also curious if the city did update its climate action plan to be in alignment with the agreed upon science. How would that impact what the CIP is, or how it can adjust if things that have gone through it are no longer in alignment, or not doing what they need to do, not as large of changes as we need?
Hey, Mike and Liz, if you want, I have a response for this that I can throw in first.
Sure.
It's maybe a little less about how the CIP team will, and just how generally we will as Public Works, Julia. This came up recently. I think the city is planning on doing an update to the climate action plan sometime soon. And so when that happens, I think it'll be broader than just the CIP team. It'll also be like, what does that mean for our TAP goals? And like then the same thing that happened with TAP, like when we passed TAP, that kind of had to funnel down to then, okay, what does that mean for the CIP? So it would be kind of a cascading effect. So I don't think there's like a specific answer of how will that specifically change the CIP, but I think maybe from a process standpoint, it would look something similar to how the TAP kind of impacted the CIP process. And if Mike or Liz, if that doesn't seem fair, or if you want to add anything else, feel free to do that. But that would just be my kind of guess at what that process could look like.
I think that makes sense to me.
Yep, agreed.
I guess kind of what I'm curious about is even knowing that we're not necessarily using that as our metrics, but also knowing what the science is and what it says for cities. And it seems like there might be stuff that makes sense for us to put forward or not put forward because it is more or less meaningful. I guess I'm curious about how much we let this guide us when it's not yet guiding public works. And that might be rhetorical, and so no need to answer.
I think that might be more of a question for your work, Julia, on this committee versus something we can help you answer, I think.
And Julia,
I was realizing that.
I think it's a good framing question for like next month when we're talking about what to put in that resolution and like what does the PAC want about. Like I think it's a good question, and I do also think it's.
It was more linked. It was linked more directly till it was out of my mouth, and then I was like, "Oh, this is not something that the presenters should need to hear." So sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, with that, and seeing no other hands, we'll move on. And in the meantime, thank you, Mike and Liz, and welcome aboard, Bria. Thank you all for being here and presenting on CIP.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. The next item on the Program and Policy Subcommittee agenda is the 2022 Regional Solicitation Overview with Ethan Foley from Minneapolis Public Works is here. Friend of the PAC, Ethan Foley, welcome.
Hey, I'm happy to get introduced as a friend of the PAC. That's great. Nice to be back to see everyone. I'm going to try to do a slideshow here. Peter, if you can confirm that that's working.
It is.
Okay, good. I sometimes fail at these, so I'm glad I'm not failing this time. So great to see everyone. I'm Ethan Foley, based in transportation planning and programming. I'm a Vision Zero coordinator, but I work periodically on other things, and one of those this time was helping in our initial thinking about regional solicitation projects we might apply for this upcoming round. So I'm happy to be here to share some of that with you all. So maybe you haven't heard of the Met Council's regional solicitation. That would be totally appropriate and fine. So this is basically how the region funnels federal transportation money to local jurisdictions, mostly cities, counties, and Metro Transit. And so they allocate about $100 million a year, and they do this in applications are accepted every 2 years, and then they award projects every 2 years based on those applications. So they are coming up for the next round of applications for this coming spring. They will be due for projects that would be built in 2026 or 2027. So we are looking a little ways out here, but not too far in transportation funding terms. I want to just touch on one thing briefly, is that these dollars do not come with any extra design requirements or other things than we normally have to handle. So like if it's on a totally local street, we would have the same requirements as normal. If it's on a state aid street, we would need to follow the state aid standards like normal. So just a note on that, there sometimes can be confusion about what extra strings come in place. But from a design perspective, our hands are not tied. Some examples of projects funded through this. You can see here Hennepin Avenue reconstructions, a couple of those, including the one in the final design stage right now, or still the planning design stage, I guess. Some of the ones that were just mentioned, like the Hennepin Dunwoody Bikeway. Right now, we're finalizing design for the Lindell Avenue North pedestrian safety improvements project, Green Central Safe Routes to School, the Johnson Street and 35W safety improvements that Mike mentioned as well. So, so with that, that's a little bit of the grounding. Actually, before I hop into which ones we're looking at here, so the Met Council manages a complex process for ranking and ultimately selecting the projects that they're funding. It happens through a board called the Transportation Advisory Board, which I actually used to serve on prior to joining the city. And as we thought about these projects, a big part of our driving and thinking about it is both making sure that we have a project that we think fits our priorities for the city. That's essential. And also projects that we think can get funded, because it's valuable for us to get more federal funding to come in to support our priorities. And so some of these things are shaped in part, not exclusively, in part by ranking of projects. So, and what will score well and hopefully get funded. And so for today, I should also just note it's going to be similar. We're sort of just sharing details on this, and we'll share some next steps at the end. So with that, I'm going to go into the pedestrian projects. So the city actually advocated for an increase in the maximum award for the pedestrian projects. And we were successful in getting that. So now these projects can be awarded up to $2 million rather than $1 million, which is good because it allows us to invest more in improving pedestrian environment in the city. So we currently have narrowed this down to 4 potential projects. And you can see them here, 42nd Street, a section of that kind of in the busier part between Nicollet and Cedar. And we would probably tie that with a few intersections along Bloomington Avenue, kind of in that area. So these are 42nd's a high injury street, and Bloomington, we have some other work going on in the area. So we're trying to combine with things that will allow us to maximize the value of, say, curb ramp upgrades or other projects like that. We're also looking at 1st Avenue North and 2nd Avenue North in the Warehouse District. And again, the exact details of that will be decided like in the coming months, and the exact which ones of these will be selected are going to be determined after we do a little bit more detailed planning and some engagement in some cases in the coming months. 13th Avenue North, kind of in the commercial district of that section. We're looking at potentially there for some ped improvements. Chicago Avenue, kind of just in the southern part of downtown and then heading out of downtown. This would be upgrading, probably just choosing a few of the intersections there that maybe we could make some upgrades on. Quite a few of them do have curb extensions and other things, so we would be looking to augment that with the intersections that maybe those were missed on. So so as noted here, we're generally going to be deciding which within these which intersections and other things would be selected. In some cases, we might be able to do more longer linear improvements, but a lot of these will be intersection improvements. I'm going to pause here and see if there are questions, because I know this is the PAC and you might be interested in these.
Yeah, looking around. Any questions here in this interlude?
Ethan, I got a question. Are these streets all on the high injury network based on the Vision Zero plan?
Some are, most are. So 42nd Street I mentioned, 1st Avenue and 2nd Avenue North and the Warehouse District are. Chicago Avenue is, but 13th Avenue North East is not. but we see an opportunity to potentially couple it with some other improvements that are happening in the area, and we know that it is, a valuable and important pedestrian area where the pedestrian environment could be improved, both for safety but also for comfort and attractiveness.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
We saw a project in the last month or two of 42nd Street improvements from Cedar to Nicollet. Would this be, is it added medians and such? Is that the same as this, or would be added onto this?
Yeah, I assume you're referring to the Vision Zero program project that will be installed there this coming spring. Yeah, the intention would be to upgrade those bollard improvements and many of those bollard improvements to curves with this regional solicitation funding.
All right.
And that's sort of a model we're looking at with the Vision Zero program, kind of holistically, is upgrading it over time as we have resources available.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Guess we can carry on, Ethan.
All right. So trails and bikeways, there's a bit more money available here. Larger projects can get funded. We're looking at the North Side Greenway, as Mike had mentioned, phase 1 of that, and then 2nd Street North Bikeway. So this would be kind of for we'll determine the exact limits of it, but for a lot of the 2nd Street portion, kind of coming from Upper Harbor Terminal and connecting out from there. And these would be typically what we do with these types of projects is it's in the bikeway and trail category, but we are including a lot of pedestrian and general safety improvements as part of the project, and that would be what we're doing with these as well. We still may consider one additional project in this category as well going forward. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to just kind of keep going. But if you raise your hand, stop me if you have any questions, anything like that along the way. Safe routes to school, we can get up to $1 million here, and we are looking at an application for 21st Avenue South, which goes along South High, and I'm blanking on the elementary school right this moment, but connects from the Greenway south to 43rd, and so we're looking at some improvements there for safe routes to school. Roadway modernization, so this is basically can partially fund our street reconstruction projects, and we can only apply for these on certain arterial streets, so certain busier streets. And we've narrowed this down to 3 potential street reconstruction projects, and that's 7th Street North, kind of coming out of downtown. If you're kind of just behind the Twin Stadium, kind of going north from there over the freeway and connecting up to Van White Boulevard. Some of this is, there's a lot of coordination that would happen with potential routing based on potential routing of the Blue Line light rail extension. So we've got some things to kind of still figure out in this area, but hopefully the timing will work out well for potential application here. 3rd Street South in downtown. This is from Hennepin Avenue, kind of over close to the kind of where it turns less like a street and more like a highway. And so that portion of 3rd Street in downtown. 35th Street and 36th Street, which are para streets around 35W, so between Nicollet Avenue and Park Avenue. So for these, what we do is we would fund the street reconstructions, but really we're able to, obviously follow through on our guidance and policies to deliver projects that are prioritizing complete streets and benefits for people walking and biking and taking transit. So we would look to incorporate that into these projects and whatever way we can. Yes, Paul. Oops, Paul, you're muted.
Back in the day when I submitted some projects like this, when I was working for St. Paul, This category, there is some criteria and scoring of points based on, how you improved capacity or level of service for vehicles. Is that still a criteria in this category, or have they become a little bit more flexible on it?
Congestion reduction is still one, gets you some points. We just sort of assume that we're going to get 0 for that, honestly, but we get points for safety improvements and multimodal investments, and we still think we can do well enough to compete in this category, recognizing that our focus is on improving the multimodal environment and still moving more people efficiently. It's just, it's a little different than the traditional approach. So some of that's there, but it's not as strong in the scoring as it used to be, because regionally that's sort of the shift is to more of a recognition of multimodal focus.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, there's another category called spot mobility and safety, which this is the one that funded the Johnson Street at 35W improvements that will be coming up in a couple of years, as Mike had mentioned earlier. So this is more geared towards like an individual or maybe a couple intersections. And we do have a little bit of funding available here, but again, we can only do this on busier arterial streets. Right now, we are looking at 2 potential applications, 26 in Hiawatha, which we know is a high crash intersection, a lot of pedestrian challenges among those safety challenges. And so looking at some things there, I would say that those changes are, we're going to be working to make significant improvements within that intersection, but with the money available, it's not like we're going to be making it. Thank goodness we're not going to be turning this into like Lake and Hiawatha. So we're going to be working to make big pedestrian and safety focused improvement at that intersection. And then Olson Highway is part of it. Olson is owned by the city. And so east of Lyndale Avenue, just for a couple blocks there, it's owned by the city. And so we're looking at improvements at a couple intersections there. This could be a very transformative project potentially. And there is coordination with Blue Line, light rail extension, potential routing again. So we'll see where those go. But I think some potentially valuable ones for pedestrian side especially. And then there's a new category this year called unique projects, which is basically anything outside of the other categories that is eligible for federal transportation funding. And the city is planning to apply for a mobility hubs expansion. So I think folks probably are familiar with our mobility hub program. We're working to bring together different resources, mobility resources from transit to bike share to scooter share to kind of electric shared vehicle access, kind of different things together in one space, along with information and place, public space making and other things like that. So we're looking at an application there, and we'll probably have some interesting things for the ped side as well. And then I think this is the final one I got. Bridges, we can get some money here. We struggle sometimes to score well here, but we are considering a potential application, Nicollet Avenue over Minnehaha Creek, which we have applied for in the past, but haven't quite made it, but maybe this time, we'll see. So just a note on that. And then traffic management technologies. This is sort of infrastructure from an IT kind of behind the scenes signal capacity kind of thing. And we are looking at an application here for information technology solution upgrades on our system to help us have more bandwidth to have smarter traffic signals and things like that. So that's something we're looking at as well. There is a category for transit modernization, also categories for bus rapid transit projects. There's also a transit expansion category as well. The transit ones, we've never applied as a city for the transit ones. We did consider it, but we ended up deciding that some of the things that we're doing for bus only lanes and things are better funded locally, not through federal funding, and that we will focus on trying to support good Metro Transit projects in these categories, but we understand the importance of that. And Metro Transit does get a lot of good projects funded through this, so that's great. So overall, we are planning to apply for between 10 and 15 projects. I think my personal goal is that we would get at least $25 million, which is a big deal for us. And then we are of those projects that we currently are potential projects. We have 13 defined with locations. And of those, you can see the kind of the background across the city. So we tried to provide, a balance of different projects throughout the city, and then while also making sure that we are thinking about racial equity. So the ACP 50s that are mentioned here, I know we're moving away from that in the future, but we haven't quite figured out where we're going yet. But that's areas of concentrated poverty where a majority of residents are people of color. And so you can see that more than a vast majority of these projects are either fully or partially in those areas, and kind of distributed across the city. Next steps here, we'll be starting some planning on these projects. We're already kind of getting that rolling on some of the bigger ones. Some of those will include some initial engagement out in the community and to support applications, but then there'll be even more in the future as we go. So you can think about it like we actually got funded a couple of years ago through the regional solicitation for the Hennepin Avenue and Uptown project. And that was, we had a little bit of engagement ahead of that, but most of the engagement was after that. So just so you all know that don't expect a ton of engagement on all these projects immediately. We will figure out getting approval from the city council or mayor, whatever it requires, in probably about March, just so you know, and applications will be submitted in April, and then we'll hear either late this year, early next year on what we've been funded, and then, as I mentioned, projects would be implemented in 26 or 27. So that's what I've got. Happy to answer any other questions.
I've got
Ethan.
a question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Ethan, do you know any projects Hennepin County will be submitting under this process within the city of Minneapolis?
We do expect the county to submit some good projects as well. I think I would just say I don't know that they finalized those, and I don't really want to speak not knowing where they're at kind of in that process. But I think that in the past they have been very successful with their getting roadway modernization projects funded. This past time it was Franklin Avenue and Lowry Avenue Northeast. And so I think that they're looking at two kind of important streets for reconstruction. They've talked publicly a lot about Lyndale Avenue South as one of those. So I think some of those decisions still have to be finalized, but I would expect a couple of good ones in Minneapolis there, and then and some bikeway projects as well. So I think that we'll have some good projects from the county.
Okay, thank you.
Looking around too for more hands. As the I guess a good point to ask what you might like from PAC on this. We're happy to. I don't know if it's resolution directed towards this, or we could give a ranking of projects you submitted.
Yeah. Mostly we wanted to make sure that you're aware of what we're thinking of. Sure, certainly, if you have strong opinions, you can share those. And at the same time, we feel pretty good about the list we have bringing forward here. and especially when we're balancing both city priorities and what can get funded. And so there is a lot of thinking that goes into that side of it. So I would say resolution is optional, depending on what you're thinking. And so, yeah, always happy to hear from the PAC.
Great. When projects you apply for and don't come back successfully, do you get feedback as to what you should do better, or what were they deficient in point terms or whatever, or that you can, or the pass failed?
Yeah, it's you can see how it ranks. So they do provide scores. So they try to have a process. They're trying to remove the politics as much as possible from the process. So they have kind of technical staff rankings of different criteria, and then you can see where your project's scored in different areas. You can understand the balance. What I would also say is, like, you know, if I sit down and look at a project, I can give you probably within 10% what it's likely to get scored at, and it's mostly about how does it compare to other projects around the region. What I would say is that the city of Minneapolis is very well set up within the scoring to score well for pedestrian projects. We had the top ranked pedestrian project last time by, like, I think it was like 25% higher than the second ranked project. And so I think the ones we have on the table for this year would very likely score highly, and it will be mostly about how much money they decide to spend and invest in pedestrian projects. You know, and that's something that we can't control, although, you know, we are part of the process, and we always advocate for more funding for, you know, walking, biking, and transit.
All right, thanks. Hey, Barb, that's got her hand up. Barb.
Yeah, my question is, we had any of the projects that you talked about, if they aren't funded through this process, do the projects still continue to look for funding in other areas, or if they don't get federal funding, do they continue to look for funding so they might be funded through some other application?
It varies, honestly. So certainly we, like, let's say a street reconstruction project. Last time we applied for 2 street reconstruction projects that we just realized, you know, after the fact that we were going to struggle to compete with at a regional level, getting them funded. And we frankly have just had to kind of say, we're going to take a different approach. And so I think, you know, it's sort of a balance of things. We'll try to figure out how we can fund it through a future CIP if we're able to, but definitely on the timeline that we're talking about, you know, you can't, there isn't an alternative way to get it funded on the same timeline. But typically, and I should have mentioned more specifically as well that there's highway safety improvement program funds that are sort of solicited for similar timelines to regional solicitation. I didn't bring those yet because we're still working on those details, and there's still a lot of uncertainty about the money available there. But there are sometimes other sources that we can apply for and look to as well. So it's kind of a combination of things, but we certainly try to get the funding makes a big difference. I'll just say that.
Well, and the reason I ask is that we had the Nicollet Avenue Bridge Rehabilitation Project come to the INE this past meeting. And I'm assuming that's the same project that you're talking about. And so they were doing some preliminary work to present information to the PAC and maybe to the Bicycle Advisory Committee as well about their goals for that project.
Yeah, so that is on, I think, on the city's legislative agenda and for bonding requests. So yeah, you know, we have gone to regional solicitation a few times for that one. And so it is an important priority for us, and we're trying to figure out how we get it done. And it's always challenging. You know, those bridge projects are expensive and challenging. So, you know, yes, sometimes we look for other sources as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. And it's 11 minutes to the hour, so we got one more item to get to. So I will happy to entertain like any final question or comment for Ethan before we let him go.
I do have one kind of question or comment, or you mentioned arterials and soliciting funding, which I know often comes with requirements around ADT and what kind of traffic flow you're looking at, and doesn't necessarily look at parallel streets. But I'm wondering, with the zoning that we have, putting higher density housing along arterials, what kind of thinking is going on internally around requests that kind of lock in higher levels of pollution adjacent to the most housing?
Julia, I know we've talked about this when I presented on the street design guide as well. And
yeah,
we, our policy is, it's aligned. We are looking to make safety and other improvements on these streets while recognizing they are important for moving people in a lot of different ways, including transit and including walking, including biking, and including driving. So we aren't locked in anymore for these regional solicitation applications than it's in line with we're able to put forward applications that are in line with our city plans and policies.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Thanks for being here today.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it as always. Take care.
You too. Thanks. And finally on our agenda, a discussion item. We're going to bring up some conceptual notion that Julia and I have been kicking around, kind of on the a notion of influencing, how we can better influence the change in the change that we're looking for in infrastructure and policies, et cetera. And Julia's going to kick that off.
Alrighty. So one of my many interests is user-centered design or design thinking. And listening to a podcast somewhat recently, I was reintroduced to the notion of friction and introduced to the concept of fuel, and finding them really exciting to think about for the work that we do here. And they're basically, so user-centered design is looking at how people actually interact with different systems. It's often digital, and it's taking human behavior, psychology, ergonomics, all different factors to see how people are using things, try to make it easier, or encourage people to make better choices. Sometimes that might mean choices to make them spend more money, but it could theoretically mean, making choices that are healthier or better for the environment, et cetera. So within that, there's sort of looking at that decision making. The concept of friction is things that place a barrier between a person and making a decision. And the concept of fuel is the motivation that a person has, or the whatever forces are driving them forward into decisions. So the friction, the example that I have used in the past is that I am somebody who, if I buy my large bag of candy, which I have been doing periodically during COVID, will eat it till it disappears so long as it's in front of me, even past the point of enjoyment. And then, 2 weeks later, be like, I don't want to go to the store, but I'm out of candy. It's been a long pandemic. So I find that putting it where I know it is, but slightly out of my reach and out of my vision, is a really good way for me to have it when I want it and nicely distracted from it, and putting it in, so that's creating a friction for the choice that I have. And an inverse of that is that I love apples, but when I get super hungry, I don't have the energy to wash an apple. So I pre-wash all my apples and have them easy to grab when I need my sugar rush. And that is removing a friction. So fuel that one is a little newer to me. I'm still wrapping my head around it. But when Peter and I have been discussing it, we've been thinking about the choices that there's a lack of friction for status quo choices. And there's often a lot of friction for making choices that are ones that we need. There might be friction in terms of social pressures. There might be friction in terms of needing to take extra steps to figure out how to do something differently. There's just a lot of places that there can be barriers. And when you're thinking about fuel, if you're thinking, well, you know, are people feeling motivated to take up that extra work? And how can we, as the PAC, be cognizant of what friction points are for people we're working with or in what we're doing, or what kind of fuel we can be providing. So those are the kind of the two terms. Peter, I'll throw it back to you to figure out if I've described it very well or.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, you did. And you know, and I took the if I'm understanding it correctly, and I'm relating it to maybe relating it in a gross terms to our work. You know, when we pitch resolutions at an infrastructure project, we are very, you know, we're all about fuel. You know, we're gonna, you know, fuel is, you know, in sales terms is features and benefits. So if it's I don't know, it's like a, you know, we want protected bike lanes, and we want because it's protected bike lanes is a feature that if that means safer travel for bikers, and narrower lanes mean safer travel for everybody. You know, ramps and tactile surfaces improve, you know, you make easier travel for everyone, and particularly for people who have mobility, extra mobility challenges. Those are all examples of fuel. So we want all these things to deliver all these things. So the friction would be the side that says, why doesn't it just all, you know, it's like, oh, if we all agree that these are all good things, why do they, and I think, you know, yeah, any person on the street would agree these are positive things. Why do they, what keeps them from actually happening can be, I think the notion of friction can explain a lot of it, can give us a framework for that. And in this case, you know, are we, you know, and I don't think you know, we're always talking about inconveniencing drivers being this, you know, to being a big hurdle, and that is in and of itself true, I think. But it's not the actual friction is the belief of the drivers why they're being inconvenienced. That is, if we're saying, anybody who spends time walking out or biking out, you see drivers race past stop signs or race through a red light only to catch the next one. So we're saying, so one of those friction points of driver inconvenience are this belief that their travel times are impacted are harmed. They're slowed down in a meaningful way. And I think to just complete the thought of approaching the friction component of that is assuring or demonstrating, proving that, you know, that the travel times are not affected. You know, traveling, you know, and we know that's true from, you know, traveling, you know, 40 miles an hour versus 30 miles an hour over typical stretches does not add any meaningful trip shortening, especially when there's traffic control lights, et cetera, involved. How does that sound back to you, Julia, as relating it to somewhat to our work?
I think to me, there's a lot of places where this does relate to our work, both in terms of how we view what's happening in the built environment, as well as how we view our role on the PAC, both in what the systems are that the planners and engineers we're talking to are working in, and also the ways that we work with the people who come to us to assist them and reduce friction that they may face. Increased fuel that they may have to carry forward the goals that we share. Is this making sense to others? Is this resonating? Is it just confusing? And 1 minute.
Right. So, we're gonna come back to it too. But is there any comments are welcome in this last moments of our meeting today?
I guess I'll just say that, like, I like that you guys are giving this thought for sure, and that, you know, sometimes friction is a good thing with people are being slowed down in like thought and spending money and all these other things, whereas at the same time, ideas that promote inefficiencies also, you know, that kind of friction is bad. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, in my opinion, sometimes friction can be good or bad, and it's an interesting way to look at pedestrian projects. So thanks for bringing it up. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely.
All right,
Definitely
awesome.
love the good friction. I mean, that's one of the things, like, I think walking does for us is at least for me, I make fewer impulse purchases because I'm carrying them all home on my back. So there's that friction is a really positive thing.
For real. And with that, it's 6 o'clock. Anybody have a last comment or an announcement, or then or if not, we will adjourn next. 3, 2, 1. Thanks, everybody. Good meeting. Appreciate all the. Yeah. Good luck on your turkey brining, etc.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.